Yeah, well, Thiago, perhaps.
Tiago,
So,
yes, exactly. He was just
so
mentioned.
the actually, I forgot to put our names on the top slide. We focus on the content, but you can find the slides on Zenodo, and I'll update all the authors. What we plan to do in this session is basically give a very brief introduction to Scholia. I guess most people in the room here know it, but there might be people who join just for this session. Then we will also give a very brief introduction to the graph split. Again, we've just discussed this in the previous session, but for whoever comes just for this session, that they have some background. Then we will discuss a bit of what the Scholia survey gave us, some content development, specifically on chemistry, and we will look ahead, like what are the plans for the next few months, basically. Let's start with that. So Scholia is a scholarly profiling services that you can access on ToolForge, and the basic idea is that it provides a way to browse Wikidata content without the user needing to know SPARQL, and it provides about 30 profile types that you can access via this URL with a URL pattern /profile type /QID. So, for instance, /author and then /the QID of some person. Each visualization, each page shows a number of visualizations, and each of these visualizations are based on SPARQL queries to the Wikidata query service. So this makes it easy for people to browse the Wikidata content without them having to write the SPARQL themselves. So the SPARQL is pre-written, pre-computed. These Scholia queries are interesting because they focus, while they focus on the scholarly content, they also touch on essentially every part of Wikidata. And they make use of much of the functionality of SPARQL, much of the functionality of the Wikidata query service, and they often serve as examples of what Wikidata or Wikibase in general can do. But there was a graph split earlier this year, and with that, much of that functionality actually broke. So we have a temporary solution. So the graph split is relevant for Scholia because Scholia uses the Wikidata query service. The Wikidata query service uses BlazeGraph, and BlazeGraph essentially has trouble handling graphs above a certain size, roughly 100 million items. Wikidata now has about 100 million items. It's not entirely broken yet, but as a means of precaution, the graph was split into two that in short can be named as scholarly and all the rest, which is called main. And a search for a long-term replacement of BlazeGraph is ongoing for Wikidata and for Wikibase. And Scholia is also looking for a replacement of the BlazeGraph setup. For now, basically until the end of this year, Scholia has one dedicated server where the full graph is still being served. That server is to be switched off in early 26. And so the Scholia team is working on a solution that does not require that legacy setup. And if that works out for Scholia, it might also be interesting for the transition of Wikidata and Wikibase as a whole. But yeah, this will have to be explored in more detail later. So in short, what did we do to try to address this situation? So we explored actually rewriting Scholia queries such that they make use of the new graph split setup, so that we would go from the old kind of queries, which were having a BlazeGraph specific syntax, and we would then rewrite them into the new, still BlazeGraph specific syntax, but with the additional complication of having two BlazeGraph endpoints. And yeah, we defined a decision tree as to under which conditions it is useful to do this or that, and we gave a poster at a conference about this, and also we wrote a paper. And so we've explored this in quite some detail. We've also looked at running Scholia based on a dedicated SPARQL endpoint, which could be either like a copy of what is currently the legacy full thing, It could be based on live data or on dumps. It could be based on BlazeGraph or on other Sparkle engines, particularly Clever. And for now, since like at some point we had to make a decision, and the end of 25 is coming near, we decided to explore Clever in more detail. And so Clever, as was already briefly shown in the previous session, is a Sparkle engine as well. And it is said to be scaling better than BlazeGraph. It is actually used by some graphs that are much larger than Wikidata. You can find it here on that URL. It has a basically an instance that can serve Wikidata data. It is open source. And so we've taken that and kind of built a new version of Scholia. This is still experimental, not finished, not ready to be used by uninitiated people, basically, but it exists. And we're trying to fine-tune this so that in the end, the functionality of Scholia will be preserved, but Clever will be the backend for the queries. And one interesting aspect of that move from BlazeGraph to Clever was that we needed Clever on its own does not have a query UI that provides the same kind of visualizations as the Wikidata query service does. Most Sparkle endpoints only give you tabular data in return, but the Wikidata query service, because it is used by people who are not computer scientists and who are not fluent in Sparkle as well, it does provide a set of visualizations, and it was relatively straightforward to actually plug that into Clever. So we got this to run. This part actually works fine, but the conversion of the queries, as was the content of the previous session, that still takes some more effort. So we have provisionally converted Scholia's 400 query templates from a BlazeGraph Sparkle syntax to a more standard Sparkle syntax. And that standard Sparkle is understood by BlazeGraph, by Clever, and also by other Sparkle engines. So if we ever need to migrate again from Clever to somewhere else, this should be easier because now we're focusing on standard Sparkle, and essentially any Sparkle engine that is worth that name should understand standard Sparkle. Some of the components of existing Scholia queries, they cannot be easily converted, and they need a bit more work. So for instance, while every Sparkle endpoint understands RDFS labels, so one way to do labels, these labels are monolingual. And in Wikidata, we have had this service Wikibase label, which provides a service that is aware of it can retrieve multilingual labels and also has a fallback kind of hierarchy of languages. If language A is not available, then go for language B and this kind of thing. That is not standard Sparkle. There are also things like Wikibase around for geographic Sparkle queries, where again, this is not standard Sparkle. And so we need to look into how to, to what extent we can preserve that kind of functionality, or how it can be implemented in Clever. And also, as we transition, our focus right now is not on replacing all the queries with Clever, but initially just on replacing those queries with Clever where the current Wikidata setup doesn't work. It's essentially those that touch the Scholia graph. There are some Scholia queries that actually do not touch the scholarly graph, like for instance, the academic tree graph on an author profile. And while we're developing this, documentation is not the focus because the technical setup is changing quite quickly. But we are aware that if we want to kind of switch this and put this into production and have people use this new setup, then of course we will need to do documentation. Now, yeah, a different topic. But of course, the two are somewhat related. So as the end of last year, 24, was nearing and the graph split was kind of in the air, it wasn't affected yet, but it was kind of announced. We ran a Scholia survey in order to get to know our user base a bit better, since Wikidata and the query service and also Scholia, we do not do any user tracking, contrary to competitors. And but that of course makes it a bit harder to get to know something about the user base. Of course, we have sessions like this where you can provide direct interactions, but sometimes a survey is also useful. And this survey should also inform us as we prioritize, like, do people want to focus on keeping all the functionality of Scholia, or are they fine with some kind of changes in the functionality? Then how the people would like to stay in touch with the Scholia team and so on. The survey ran for several months. You can access the results here at that URL. And in the following slides, I have included some slides that are taken directly from that results slide set here. So we had 42 unique responses, and some people left their Wikimedia username, and we got some emails of people who indicated they're willing to participate in follow-ups. Thank you for that. Then we asked how familiar are people with WikiCite within Wikidata. We also asked them how they discovered Scholia. We asked them how often they use Wikidata and how often they use Scholia. In short, most people use Wikidata more often than Scholia. But yeah, the patterns are similar. Then through which channels would people like to interact with Scholia? There is like a preference for doing this via wiki pages and essentially GitHub, but also Mastodon or Signal. Then why do people use Scholia? Well, it's to research individuals. That's like author profiles, topics. We have a topic profile, we have an organization's profile here to develop other Wikimedia content, yeah, like for instance Wikipedia pages or something like this here, and so on. Then we also got some responses, some structured and some non-structured responses to the question of why do you use Scholia. So they use it for data curation, because if you curate the data that underlies the query that is used by Scholia, then you can actually use that Scholia query to see whether you've curated your data correctly or whether there are still things to be done. Yeah, and yeah, some people do it on an institutional basis, or they want to resolve author strings and so on. Yeah, so Scholia is integrated with some other tooling, like for instance the author disambiguator. So if you're doing curation of WikiCite data, then Scholia assists with that. Then we also looked at, okay, people who use WikiCite or Scholia, what kinds of other things do they engage with? And there are a bunch of such services, mostly library focused. Then we also asked what's missing in Scholia. As we are rewriting the fundamentals, like we are going into the guts of Scholia anyway, then we asked, okay, what would you like to see us focus on? And then essentially everybody said, yeah, the data of my discipline. As in the previous session, people said, oh yeah, please put all of astronomy in there and things like this. But there are constraints, and the answers we got here, they help us prioritize further development. Then, yeah, we also asked whether people have anything else they'd like to share, and essentially we got positive feedback and also some suggestions for new features. We also asked, what do you not like about Scholia? And it's essentially there's certainty about the graph split. I hope that while we can't remove the uncertainty, at least we have a reasonable way forward. And yeah, with that, we're moving to the next component of this talk, which is we do continue to work on content aspects. So for instance, we've focused over the last few years a bit more on chemistry than on other aspects. And we also actually wrote this up into a paper for which you can access the preprint here. And that meant that we were curating physical chemical properties of about 1.5 million chemicals related literature, then additional chemical information like structural classification, and also external identifiers to chemical databases for which Wikidata has relevant properties. Another thing we worked on was a special kind of profile type, which is retractions. So if you go to that URL on Scholia, you can get information about retractions. The data is incomplete for the last few years, essentially because of the scaling issues of Wikidata, but it is relatively complete until 2020. So we being Wikidata, we're tracking about 22,000 retracted articles and relationship between the original article and the retraction, and also to some extent the way it was retracted and the reasons and things like this. And yeah, there's Wiki project retractions, and you can join that. Now, the road ahead is we will have two hackathons, Scholia hackathons, to finalize the replacement of the provisional setup that we have for this year. And these hackathons will run essentially throughout the week of November 10 and throughout the week of December 8. And we're currently setting up the infrastructure for that. You're welcome to join. And then we will also, if all of this works fine, the first one will focus on actually rewriting the things in the SPARQL queries that still need to be rewritten. The second one will mostly focus on documentation, but if we are not done with the rewriting the technical part, then the second one will also serve as a buffer for this. And so if everything goes well, then we expect Scholia to be functional still by the end of the year, but using a different backend. So once the backend that we're using right now is switched off, the user actually shouldn't notice any difference. Or maybe better performance even. Documentation will be ongoing. The focus right now for this year is on actually getting the backend to work with the new setup. And once that is the case, we will document things more. Yeah, with that, I would like to thank you, providing a few links here on how you can reach us. And I'll go back to I'll stop sharing my screen so that I can see what you actually wrote in the chat. And yeah, please, questions or comments.
So thank you so much, Daniel. Yeah, please, anyone in the audience, if you have a question, please raise your hand and unmute your microphone. We have in the chat from Christian Cantora, they ask if you could share the link to the paper on the poster that you mentioned earlier.
Okay. Yeah, well, the poster is linked from the presentation here. And the paper is actually not public yet for some strange reason. The conference took place 2 months ago by now, but the conference organizers haven't managed to make it public. But I think we can upload it on Commons, and maybe that's the best we can do for now. So maybe one of the Scholia team in the audience, please take note that we do this. But the decision tree is on Commons already. The poster is on Commons. It's just that the conference paper isn't public yet.
Sure. So you can revisit the presentation on Commons and find the poster linked inside. I see we also have a comment from Nikki that you can modify the Wikidata query service UI point to any endpoint. It doesn't have to be Wikidata or BlazeGraph.
Oh yeah, that's an important point. So we had some Scholia hackathons earlier, and one of the features that we introduced there was that you can now adjust the query endpoint for each individual visualization on a Scholia profile. That wasn't the case before. Before, every single visualization would go to the then one Wikidata endpoint. But already for the graph split, we needed to adapt this to be aware of 2 Wikidata endpoints. But in the process, we thought, okay, why not just make it more general, which actually allows us to convert the individual visualizations more or less one by one, so that we can switch the current transient setup of one visualization by one, which is more easily feasible than doing a giant switch.
Great, thank you. At the start of the session, we did have a question from Ismail asking what an MCP is, and Lydia then linked the Wikidata MCP. That link is also in the Etherpad. But a follow-up comment was, as Lydia said, from Hussein Turkey, it is a kind of file system that allows the LLM to get the structure of an API or database so the LLM can use it. And I suppose that's a little follow-up is that we'll have a session on MCP tomorrow with Philip Sada from here at Wikimedia Deutschland. So thank you so much, Daniel.